The laptop class move away from the inner cities and they aren't coming back. The new Labor government kicks off a charm offensive on Pacific nations, hoping to strengthen relations with our nearest neighbours. And another big shareholder comes out against the AGL demerger. It's Thursday, the 26th of May, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. It's Thursday. Very exciting day for anyone at Fear and Greed, isn't it?
It is my favourite day of the week because there is a new episode of Safe Word by Fear and Greed out today.
Yes, it's our lighter look at what's going on in the business world. We spent quite a bit of time on the election and what it'll be like for Anthony Albanese to meet some of the business leaders and, basically small talk. What does Anthony Albanese talk to Emmanuel Macron about, or Joe Biden about, or Narendra Modi about?
Yeah, because you assume that when they have a phone call, when they all ring him up, first of all, to congratulate him on winning the election before they meet with him, obviously, at the Quad, that they would have to start with small talk. And so we do have a bit of a chat about kind of where does that conversation start before they get to the official stuff, before they get to the policy. So, look, it's a fascinating conversation full of a whole lot of speculation and not much substance, I'm sure.
Zero substance, but I found it very entertaining.
Oh, same here. And look, you can find Safe Word by Fear and Greed. It's out every Thursday. Just search for it. Go to your podcast platform, wherever you're listening, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever, and search for Safe Word by Fear and Greed. It does come out every Thursday, so make sure you hit follow so that you get it straight to your playlist. Now, Sean, immediately after the show today, you've got an interview coming up with Matt Codrington, who's the Managing Director of Lenovo for Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, you think of Lenovo and you think of a big tech company, which of course it is, but it does so much work with small and medium-sized businesses that the conversation evolved into whether people were coming back into the office, how people were working now and how they will work in the future. A really interesting chat.
Yeah, it sure is. But the main story this morning is all about the housing market, really. The Reserve Bank yesterday provided an assessment of the housing market, saying rents could rise in Sydney and Melbourne, construction delays will continue, and more people are looking for a patch of grass.
That's a pretty good summary, Michael. Reserve Bank Assistant Governor Lucy Ellis said demand for standalone homes had jumped during the pandemic. People are increasingly living alone or with partners, and that's caused the average household size to fall. That more than offset the reduction in overseas migration during COVID shutdowns, that demand for housing. Also, all those adult children who moved back home at the start of the pandemic are moving out again. Very good news, Michael. Very good news.
This is another one of those stories that you have a vested interest in here, Sean, isn't it?
Totally.
This is why this is the lead story today, again, because you have an interest in it.
It's about me. Look, Ms. Ellis also said as demand for migration picks up again, rents in Sydney and Melbourne could rise quicker than expected. She said there's now an unusually large number of detached homes still to be completed, and construction time has blown out 50% to about 9 months. Supply chain problems and skills shortages are causing long delays and pushing up prices. Ms. Ellis also had a great line saying there is a shift by the laptop class, that's basically people who can work from home, to the outer suburbs because they all like their piece of grass. There was some good news, though. Eventually, things will normalise and prices will come back down a bit, and those blowout in construction times will be reduced. Though Ms. Ellis didn't actually give a date for when that would happen. That's kind of what I was hoping to hear. She just said it will happen when all the support measures work their way out of the pipeline.
The laptop class, Sean, it is a great line, and I certainly hadn't heard it before Lucy Ellis mentioned it yesterday.
She may have made it up. Lucy Ellis is one of the most erudite, colourful central bankers you'll come across. Highly intelligent, like super intelligent. But she just, her turn of phrase is really quite spectacular. So, Lucy, if it was you, congratulations. We're going to start using it, the laptop class.
I wonder if this is, you know how you always have the word of the year and it ends up being something like democracy sausage or something like that. I wonder if laptop class in about kind of 2 years' time, we'll be talking about this and looking back on today, the 26th of May, 2022 as the day that we talked about the laptop class for the first time.
I wonder. Maybe, although she could have stolen it too.
That's also a possibility. Anyway, her comments came, Sean, as figures show that home ownership, which is, of course, the great Australian dream, seems to be achievable for most of us.
Yes, around 2/3 of Australians now own their own home, with or without a mortgage. That's according to the Bureau of Statistics. Around 1/3 rent. Now, approximately 20% of people have a second residential property. The data released yesterday reflects the 2020 financial year. People with a mortgage spend about 13.6% of their gross weekly income. It doesn't sound like much, but remember, that's 13.6% before your tax is taken out, so much bigger chunk of your disposable income. People with a mortgage spend that 13.6% on housing. Renters spend about 20%. Now, the average number of persons per household was unchanged at 2.6, but the average number of bedrooms per dwelling fell slightly to 3.1. The other stat that came out, which I thought was remarkable, because no one ever has a house big enough, only 4% of people reckon they need another bedroom in their house.
Really?
I need another 2.
Well, hopefully you'll be gaining a few soon, as we discuss soon.
Part of the renovation. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Now, Sean, how did the local market perform yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 finished up 0.4% to 7,155 points, notwithstanding a final hour sell-off. BHP was down 10%. More of that in a moment. All the major banks were up more than 1%, again led by National Australia Bank. Some of the more defensive stocks, including Telstra and the big retailers, did better. Coles and Woolies both rose by 2%, for example. But the tech stocks had a poor day once again. Computershare was down 5%. WiseTech Global was off more than 3%. The actual technology index was down 3%. They just can't seem to grab a break. It was a good day for the local gold diggers after the precious metal continued its run. Now, fears that the global economy will slow down and potentially push into recession has encouraged a flight to quality for investors, and gold is quality. Perseus Mining, St Barbara and Evolution Mining all did well yesterday. Northern Star was up by 2.7%, and market leader Newcrest Mining finished 1% higher. Just quickly, Michael, oil prices rose again over the past 24 hours, with a barrel of Brent crude now fetching $114. The shift came after expectations increased that the European Union would put sanctions on Russian oil, and new sanctions in this case. I've got to say, Michael, all these old stories, I'm really sick of paying $2 plus per litre at the petrol bowser.
Oh, no, I'm completely with you there. And think about it, the fuel excise has already been halved. There's not much more that anyone can do. I think we're stuck with this for a while.
I'm afraid so.
All right, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, new Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers met with the heads of the Reserve Bank and Treasury and emerged with a less than upbeat outlook for the economy.
Mr. Chalmers said the Morrison government had left a dire fiscal situation, and it's clear there will be further interest rate rises. He said the defining challenges for the government are inflation, rising interest rates and falling real wages. Labor will make a submission to the Fair Work Commission on the minimum wage. No surprises there, given Anthony Albanese during the campaign said he supported a 5.1% rise for the lowest paid workers in the country, which of course is in line with inflation. Mr. Chalmers said no one should assume there'd be big dividends from higher commodity prices that could cover budget holes. Looking forward, we're in about $1 trillion worth of debt over the next decade or so, a massive amount. The government will undertake a review of the Reserve Bank to ensure monetary policy is conducted in the best possible way. That should be interesting, given what the central bank said would happen to interest rates over the last couple of years and what has actually happened.
And still on politics, Sean, new Foreign Minister Penny Wong heads to Fiji today.
Yes, it's part of Australia's efforts to better engage with Pacific neighbours. Ms Wong will commit to climate change initiatives, increase development assistance and security cooperation, and expand the Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Scheme. That scheme allows Australian businesses to hire workers from 9 Pacific islands for seasonal jobs. Her visit coincides with a visit to 8 Pacific nations from the Chinese Foreign Minister. So there's a bit of a charm offensive going on from both China and Australia at the moment. There are also media reports this morning that the Prime Minister will head to Indonesia and Papua New Guinea in coming months.
All right. Now, what's the latest count update?
Well, there's still 4 seats in doubt, but it does look like Labor will end up with 76, possibly 77 seats in the House of Reps. Of course, 76 gives them a majority in their own right. At the moment, ALP has 75 seats, the Coalition 57, Independents 10, the Greens 3 and 2 others, with those 4 still in doubt.
And Peter Dutton is the new leader of the Liberal Party.
He is, or at least he will be, given he's the only candidate.
All right. Now, the government, Sean, is about to roll out a 4th COVID vaccine to 1.5 million Australians.
Yes, it will be made available to people with chronic health conditions and compromised immune systems. The goal is to roll it out over the next few weeks and hopefully before the middle of winter. There are still plenty of cases being reported across the country, 13,000 in Victoria yesterday, more than 12,400 in Western Australia, nearly 9,000 in New South Wales, 5,600 in Queensland, and 4,000 in South Australia. And of course, as we've said before, that is definitely underreported, since many people just wouldn't get in touch with authorities to say that they've got COVID.
Now, Sean, I mentioned this one at the top of the show. In a blow to the proposed splitting of AGL Energy into two businesses, superfund group Hester says it will vote against the deal.
Yes, and while it only owns just shy of 0.5% of shares on issue, it does have plenty of clout within the shareholder community. AGL management want to split into two groups, one housing the dirty assets, such as the coal-fired power stations, and the other cleaner assets, including the energy retailing business. Billionaire activist Mike Cannon-Brookes, who owns 11.3% of the company, has been lobbying against the proposal. Hester boss Debbie Blakey said splitting the company wouldn't help decarbonise the economy, which is in the best interests of her members. She said responsible investors couldn't just divest the problem away, but had a responsibility to try and change the behaviour of big emitters. It's really interesting when the big investors start putting pressure on management to decarbonise. Now, AGL Chief Executive Graham Hunt has a different view to Hester. He says a demerger is the best path for an orderly and responsible transition to low carbon energy.
All right, now we talked about this one a bit lately, Sean, but yesterday, Woodside Petroleum became Woodside Energy, and this was ahead of the merger of the group with BHP's petroleum business.
Yes, the deal got the go-ahead from shareholders last week. Now, the real difference yesterday was in BHP's share price, which fell 10%. That's because the big Australian traded ex-dividend for its in-specie dividend. Stay with me, Michael, on this. Stay with me.
You're going to need to do some explaining here, Sean. Go on.
An in-specie dividend is a dividend that's paid in assets rather than cash. In this case, it's the payment of more than 914 million new shares in Woodside Energy, the new company, and that goes to BHP shareholders. Now, the value of those shares is $26 billion or thereabouts. Theoretically, that value will be added to Woodside's market cap when the two businesses come together next week, and the ASX will have a new top 10 company. For its part, that value, that $26 billion, flows out of BHP, hence the 10% drop yesterday. It doesn't make too much of a difference in terms of BHP's ranking. It still has a market capitalisation $40 billion higher than number 2 company, Commonwealth Bank.
Okay. A couple of smaller stories around this morning, Sean. Healthcare group Fisher & Paykel said it wouldn't issue profit guidance after announcing a 28% fall in net profit.
Yes, the New Zealand-based company did well during COVID because it makes respiratory equipment, so the drop in profit isn't unexpected. The group's share price fell 2.3% yesterday.
Costa Group's share price jumped 9% yesterday after upgrading forecast earnings.
Yes, the fruit and vegetable grower has had a really good time of it recently with excellent growing conditions. While fertiliser, packaging and transport costs are on the rise, export and domestic price rises will more than offset that, hence the share price jump.
And one more, Sean. Home building contracted by nearly 1% during the March quarter.
It was a bit of a surprise. Housing, non-residential and infrastructure construction all fell in the first quarter, according to the Bureau of Statistics. That will drag on official growth figures for the March quarter. They're due out next week.
All right, moving on to overseas news. The New Zealand Central Bank has lifted the official interest rates there by 0.5%.
Yes, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand pushed the cash rate to 2%, which is much higher than the Australian cash rate of 0.35%. It projected the rate would rise to at least 3.25%. The New Zealand Central Bank wants to get inflation back down between 1% and 3%. A big winner was the Kiwi dollar, which rose to its highest level in 3 weeks.
One of the world's biggest trading companies, Glencore, has admitted to bribery and market manipulation and says it will pay $1.5 billion to settle lawsuits in the US, UK, and in Brazil.
Incredible, this story. I mean, Glencore is a massive business. It produces and markets a range of metals and minerals, including copper, cobalt, zinc, nickel, ferroalloys, as well as iron ore. It's had a bunch of lawsuits hanging over it, and now it's pled guilty to charges that range from bribery and corruption in South America and Africa to price manipulation in US fuel oil markets. Glencore paid more than $100 million in bribes to government officials in Brazil, Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Venezuela. This is according to a report in Bloomberg. I just think it is a remarkable story.
Yeah, it certainly is. And Sean, a truly tragic story yesterday, and one that everyone has been talking about now for the last 24 hours. President Joe Biden has called for new restrictions on firearms after a gunman opened fire at a Texas school.
Yes, 19 children and 3 adults were killed in the deadliest school shooting ever in Texas. President Biden said it was time to stand up to the gun lobby. The 18-year-old gunman had purchased 2 military-style rifles on his birthday, killed his grandmother, and then went to the school and went from classroom to classroom, killing indiscriminately. He was eventually shot and killed by a Border Patrol agent who was working nearby. Maybe some good can come out of this by getting some sort of reform on gun ownership in the US.
Yeah, we can only hope. All right, now up next, Sean, is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. We mentioned it at the top of the show. You're speaking today to Matt Codrington, Managing Director of Lenovo for Australia and New Zealand.
That's right. And we kind of get right into how people are behaving in the workplace. Well, not quite how they're behaving in the workplace, but whether they're coming into the workplace, when they're coming in, what they're doing, the time they're spending in there. And because Lenovo is such a huge tech company, it has plenty of data on what people are doing. Really interesting chat.
Yeah, that's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Thursday, the 26th of May, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.